As I said earlier, the Shepherd of Hermas has some comments on the doctrine of eschatology, the end times, that is well worth our inspection, because there are some who claim that the Shepherd of Hermas actually advocates for an early view of dispensationalism, which is something that I have argued does not exist for the first 1800 years of church history. And so we'll examine that claim to see whether or not it's actually a verifiable claim. But first, I do want to acknowledge that even though I myself am a Reformed Protestant, the Shepherd of Hermas, in my opinion, pretty clearly outlines a futurist or a premillennial view of the end times. We can see an example of this here in chapter 23, verse 4. Here we are examining the vision of the beast that Hermas had. We briefly took a look at this when looking at the doctrine of sola fide, but we'll visit this here again. We can notice here in the bolded section that the beast had his mouth shut that it might not destroy Hermas. And Hermas has escaped the great tribulation because of his faith, and because having seen an enormous beast, he was not double-minded. But here, specifically in the language that he escaped the great tribulation, indicates that the great tribulation is something that has not occurred. Now, an objection could be raised from the amillennial position, indicating that Hermas went through the great tribulation, which indicates that the great tribulation happened in the past. However, we must remember that this is not an instance that took place in time itself. This is a description of a vision that Hermas had. So Hermas did not literally undergo the great tribulation on earth in the way that Revelation describes it. Rather, he went through the tribulation in his vision, which indicates that this is something that's going to take place in the future. In the very next verse, in verse 5, we get the first argument for dispensationalism in the Shepherd of Hermas. We read here in this bolded section that the beast is a type of the great tribulation which is coming, which again affirms the premillennial view of the Shepherd of Hermas. The great tribulation is coming, it has not already happened. I digress from there and continue on. Therefore, if you prepare ahead of time and repent with your whole heart to the Lord, you, Hermas, will be able to escape the great tribulation if your heart becomes pure and blameless. Now, the argument for dispensationalism states that Hermas has the ability to escape the great tribulation in the same way that dispensationalists believe the church will escape the great tribulation by being raptured off the earth before the great tribulation takes place. However, we can see from the previous verse actually that this text does not support dispensationalism. Hermas certainly overcame the beast or the tribulation, but he did not do so by being removed from the beast, as dispensationalists believe that Christians will be raptured off the earth. Rather, Hermas was able to overcome the tribulation by facing it head on. He was able to encounter the beast head to head, and as a result, the angel Thegri shut the mouth of the beast so that the beast would not harm Hermas. But Hermas nonetheless still faced the beast. He wasn't removed from the beast in the way that dispensationalists believe the church will be removed from the earth. Another, in my opinion, weaker argument for dispensationalism is raised in the very next chapter, in chapter 24, in the first line here, which states that Hermas escaped this world, which again could be indicating the fact that the church escapes this world through the rapture before the Great Tribulation takes place. In reality, though, if you read the greater context of this passage, which I have bolded here, Hermas, and therefore the saints, have escaped this world not by being removed from it and not being exposed to it, but rather they escape this world after first passing through the flames and being purified by them. They were not removed from the flames. They stayed and passed through the flames that you can see here in the middle section of the passage. In this way, they will throw off all sorrow and distress, and they will be purified and made useful for the construction of the tower. That is, the construction of the church. To double down on this point, the text actually compares Hermas to gold as a way to describe how Hermas is going to escape this world. Just as the gold is tested by the fire and becomes useful, so also Hermas, who dwells amongst the world, is tested and therefore will become useful. The gold is not tested by fire by being removed from the fire. In the same way, Hermas is not tested by the world by being removed from the world. Rather, he is tested by the world by enduring the world in the same way that gold is tested by the fire by enduring the fire. So this in no way supports dispensationalism. If anything, it proves that Christians will go through the Great Tribulation, assuming, of course, the Great Tribulation hasn't already happened, which I, as a Reformed Protestant, disagree with. I should say I, as a partial preterist, would disagree with, as I suppose there are some Reformed Protestants who do acknowledge a future Great Tribulation. Additional language regarding the future view of the millennium can be seen in this same chapter, which states that the Great Tribulation is a Great Tribulation which is coming. It hasn't already happened. It's not already here. And lastly, language like this can be found very early on in the Shepherd of Hermas in chapter 6, verse 7, which says, "Blessed are you, as many as who endure the Great Tribulation, once again, which is coming." This text also subtly, again, rejects dispensationalism because it acknowledges that there are going to be believers on the earth enduring the Great Tribulation, which wouldn't make sense if all the believers were removed from the earth prior to the Great Tribulation taking place.